I guess my hope or my contribution is to give people, whatever age they are, the opportunity to understand that it is about how they see things. And in terms of young people, giving them opportunity to see it differently. And with adults, giving them the opportunity, reminding them that they're the author of their own narrative, that they're creating their narrative.
Welcome to You May Contribute a Verse. I'm Brenna Jennerette, rock climber, mom, and kidlit author of The Law of Birthdays, illustrated by Maria Condra. I'm joined by my co-host, Josh Munkin, dad, kidlit author, and science communicator. This episode is proudly sponsored by Canadian children's book publisher Tealmore Press, where every book sold supports reforestation. Check out Tealmore's full catalog at tealmorepress.com, including titles like Naked, Supermoon, and newly released Fungi Are More Than Mushrooms, written by Alicia Gabriel and illustrated by Vivian Sarkny. This nonfiction title will fascinate kids and adults alike. Make sure to order yours today. Today's guest is Bonni Goldberg. We chat about writing authentic reviews, arting versus farting, the village it takes to make a book truly come alive, and the true philosophical implications of creating art and the collaboration it takes to get there. This is an inspiring one, so if you want more from Bonni, make sure to check out her book, The Right Balance, for writing exercises that help to get you into your body and through writing blocks. Here's Bonnie's verse. Oh, Bonni and I got to chit-chat about a year ago because I won a chat with her about marketing and like all things promotion before my book came out, and she was super helpful. She has a lot of really good like information and experience, so it was helpful. I got a lot of good info chatting to her, and then
I just thought her book was the greatest idea ever and really well executed. I was just really delighted by it. So it wasn't just okay, well, you wanted, here it goes. I just was really actually delighted to know about the book, and so it was more fun than usual to talk about promoting it and just connecting and hearing how it was going and writing a review and all the stuff, because I have to do that a lot with my debut picture book groups, and I love all those women, and there really aren't any men in my groups, but I loved all those people, and I'm happy to support them. But it is so much better when I really like love something.
Yeah.
Not that you don't love theirs, of course.
Right. Well, I appreciate them all.
So kind.
I love the people, and I appreciate the books. I really, really do. But, we're audiences, right? Certain things resonate more than other things. But it's always possible to be able to write something about what somebody who would appreciate this book, what they would appreciate about it. So that's kind of how I landed in how I do book reviews. But when it's like, when you just like genuinely love something, it's just, I just love this. You should like this. Everybody's going to love this. It's probably not as articulate as it should be, but the enthusiasm's there.
Totally. Well, I mean, thank you. That's so kind. And I feel like I just had a chit chat with my debut group, and we were talking about how to write reviews in a way that sort of is like quick and easy, but also, authentic. And that's sort of what we came down to also. 'Cause, you can find something to like about every book, but we're all human. So it's subjective. We'll connect with different books in different ways. And some of them just really hit. So, we chatted about that, and it was sort of like, okay, here's like a way we can do that. Like you could sort of come up with, 5, 6 templates and sort of like mix and match to be like, oh, the illustrations were, magical and delightful, and the text, jumped off the page because it, whatever, X, Y, and Z. Because you can always find something that you like about a book, to really sort of like pull out and blow up and, bring the audience into it.
And it's also sort of, for me, a philosophical thing. Like, to me, reviews are not to weigh in on whether this is a good book or a bad book, because that is, as you said, Brenna, really subjective. I think what a review should do, and I also, I remember reading reviews in the New York Times about books and about dance performances and about, theater, and this sort of attitude that the person reviewing it, the expert in that case, was definitively the person who you would listen to, whose lens through whom you would be watching something or taking in something, seems very exclusive. And the whole thing about, I think, especially in children's books, just like there are so many different children with different lenses and needs and interests and energies, there are picture books for all of them. And I think the point of a review, to me, is helping the people who should be reading this book to read it, not to tell other people, don't read it or it's bad, because it, again, it's so subjective what a parent or a child wants or needs, that's not really my job. I'm not the arbiter of who should read what and when and if, right? I'm the person with perhaps a little bit more capacity to be articulate as a writer who's thinking about these different things all the time, to be able to say, here are some really amazing things about this book. If you have a kid who is this or loves that, this is going to be a really great book. If you have a kid who loves details, and really looking through an illustration that is going to make them look at, 20 different things 20 different times, this is a great book for you. If you have a kid who that would overwhelm, then really simple illustrations are going to be much more impactful. So that's something I don't just believe about reviews. It's sort of my perspective on writing and authoring and arting, if you will, in general.
Arting, just to repeat the word. Yes.
Not to be confused with the other word.
Sometimes things get garbled.
They do. And actually, I'm working on a picture book about the other word.
Oh, hilarious. That's awesome.
Yeah. As if there aren't enough of those, but I am.
No, there are not.
Well,
there are not enough of those.
Also, that's like a universally, hilarious / loved topic for kids in our, age range that we're right for. So, I feel like there can't be too many of those,
Yeah. And, also for me, it was about seeing that there was maybe an aspect of that was missing or that hadn't been offered to children. So mine is actually, it's just a straight ahead joke book, but it's illustrated. It's a picture book. So every joke is illustrated, what it means.
Awesome.
So, because again, your audience, like some kids, whatever, it'll be fun, regardless, but some kids are very literal in their thinking. And so humor can get lost for them. But if they have an illustration, it makes it easier for them to take the joke in and understand it. So that's a wonderful, for some kids, maybe that's wonderful. Maybe that's exactly what they need to get it,
It's great to explore a subject that has been smelt in a way that hasn't been dealt, so to speak.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I had to get that out there.
So good.
I'm working on the cover now, and there's going to be a little one of those, seals like they have, like, reader's favorite or, winner of, and it's going to say #1 best smeller.
Oh, I love that.
Nobody's going to come for you with that title, that description.
Oh my gosh. I do want to say real quick though, I love your point about the fact that the illustration might actually like nail a joke for a kid or for an adult. Like I have these two friends of mine, and they are married. And one of them, like, it was like 1.5 years, 2 years into their marriage before the one was like, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, I can't like follow what you're telling me because I don't see pictures. Like, I can't see it in my brain. She sees the word, like she'll see the text like in her brain. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow, that must have been, such a key for like opening communication in your marriage, right? Like, because the other one in the marriage is so visual and so sort of like animated, that like I could see how that would be such a hard thing to get across unless you understand, look, I'm not seeing what you're telling me. Like I'm trying to, I actually just can't. So that's a really interesting thing to sort of look at for picture books as a whole, right? Like the text and the pictures is such a big deal,
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the most wonderful things, I don't know for the two of you, but even though on some level, you could argue that it's easier to get a book contract if you're an illustrator and an author all at once. I just love that collaborative aspect of children's picture books. It is one of the top things that pulled me to wanting to write picture books. That collaborative piece, that spending all your time and energy bringing out the words, getting them just right, having a whole, for those of us who can see pictures in our minds, a picture of what it could be and what it'll look like and all this, and then giving it over and an illustrator interpreting it and adding a whole other sets of layers if you're lucky to have that kind of illustrator, or even just depicting what was just in my mind for all those years. It's an incredible thrill. I think one of the other things I love about writing in general is the collaborative nature of it, even though it's often seen as something that is, a lone activity, which I don't believe it is that collaborative thing where somebody cares about those words as much as I do. Somebody is inside the story so much so that they can bring out their own version of it. I just think that's marvelous.
And it goes, we're all trying to sell books, but it goes so far beyond, they think enough about my work to pay me for what I've written. They think enough about my work to invest their energy and their intellect in making something that I wrote or that you wrote or that, we wrote as good as it possibly can be. This puts me in mind of the conversation we had with Troy Wilson, author of Perfect Man, author of a bunch of different, very sweet, very, very cute and funny books. But one thing that he was very effusive about is this same concept, this notion of it takes a village to write a book. And there's an aspect of your name being on the book that gives you a sense of ownership, but also in the same way that we talk about a director directing a movie, there are so many other names that roll through the credits that have a hand in making it fantastic. And I'm absolutely with you that, especially as I head towards my debut coming out in December, I don't know when this is going to end up airing, or maybe when it came out. I'm feeling that same thing, like seeing someone take my words and make visual magic out of them is such a gift. It's a gift that we're given through writing.
It really is. It really is. And I just, even before writing children's picture books, one of my favorite opportunities is to cross-pollinate with other creative people. I began my writing life a million years ago now, but as a poet. And I lived in an area that was really a lot of very creative people who liked to do that kind of cross-pollination. And so I had some amazing experiences with some arts organizations at the time, being able to work with a composer. So one of the things that we got to do was we went to the art museum and we picked a piece of art, and I wrote a poem and the composer wrote the music, and then it was performed by somebody else.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Both of which inspired by some other piece of visual art.
By another piece of art, yeah.
That's fantastic.
By a piece of art hanging in a museum. Don't ask me which it was. I don't even remember anymore. Because again, it wasn't about that. It was about the collaboration. And each pairing of composer and poet could do it however they wanted to. So some people decided to work together, like, this is the words, this is the music, what about this, what about that? But we didn't do that. We did it just the way a picture book is done. I went into my corner and I wrote the words. Actually, it was a little different because they went into their corner and started to create the music, and then I gave them the words, and that allowed them to do whatever they wanted to with it. But ultimately, the performer was the one who then interpreted both of ours from the, I mean, it's mind boggling, but it was a real high for me. This is the stuff I live for, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Let me ask you something about that, because I feel like, so specifically, let's say there's like a call for, an open submission for magazine, whatever, and here's the theme. You've got like, it's usually like one word, it's very broad. Sometimes I connect with that right away, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to write for that. Let me like get to work, right? Other times I'm like, well, I don't really connect with this theme, but like the magazine is cool. Let me, sort of like let it sit for a minute. So I guess my question is, how do you get into a piece like that? Because you didn't pick the art, did you? It was sort of like here's the piece. What do you write something about it?
I don't think we did pick it. That's a really good question, because it is absolutely antithetical to how I normally work. I'm the kind of writer that needs to be hit over the head by whatever the thought or idea is. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to do that.
Yes, yes.
So this is thinking back now. I think that I had to look, the Anais Nin, the author, says we don't really see things how they are, we see things how we are. So I think that in some ways, the answer to that is going into the piece and allowing wherever my headspace was to speak to me through that piece. In other words, my lens, my pair of glasses on that piece would be impacted by what's going on with me, the things I'm thinking about, the things I'm worried about, the things I'm passionate about, and then pulling that out. I mean, this was one of the things about being a poet. I just earlier said that as a writer, I have to be hit over the head, which is absolutely true, except when it came to poetry. And in poetry, my experience had always been that I might hear a phrase or something might attract me, and I would maybe start from there. But whatever I was writing was, for me, in some ways, either prophetic or cathartic in the moment. In other words, my poetry was first speaking to me and telling me something that I needed to hear. And whether I needed to hear it because it was telling me something that was going to happen, that I knew would happen, but I couldn't quite address myself consciously, or because it was happening and I needed to make sense of it or interpret it or have an imaginative way of experiencing it or dealing with it.
Wow.
I love the
interesting
prophetic versus cathartic duality. First of all, those are just extremely poetic, beautiful words. It's a good way of thinking about working through something that speaks to you. I'm writing it down.
Okay. But don't hold me to it too much, because these days I'm very much on my mission to obliterate binaries and categories like that.
That's a gradient.
I did say it. It did come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
So it's only fair game.
It's been recorded.
It's been recorded.
Yeah. It strikes me to note too, and I'm sure this has occurred to you, that so much of what this podcast is comes from and is inspired by the Walt Whitman poem from which the podcast got its name, the struggle with understanding who we are, and this expression of how we see ourselves in the world. That really speaks to me. This we see things how we are. This notion, it's extremely true.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that can be a really positive thing as well, because I think that it gives us the opportunity to be able to shift how we see things. And I think, like, for me, that is the undercurrent or the foundation of probably everything I write, is this continuous theme of seeing things differently. Look at it this way, look at it that way, look at it upside down, let's go inside out. And in that way, I guess my hope or my contribution is to give people, whatever age they are, the opportunity to understand that it is about how they see things. And in terms of young people, giving them opportunity to see it differently. And with adults, giving them the opportunity, reminding them that they're the author of their own narrative, that they're creating their narrative in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that, everything happens to you for a reason. That's not what I mean. I mean that we don't control what happens, but we certainly have agency over what we do with it, how we think about it, and the stories we tell ourselves about what's happening.
Right.
Yeah, that perspective is sort of like, it can be really empowering. Like you're saying, like you can use it as sort of a tool to change that perspective and to go outside of it and look around. There's another similar quote or thought that I thought of when you said that, but it's the way we do anything is the way we do everything, which when I first heard that, it like blew my mind, because the example was like, like for like anything, like how do you cut an apple? Like, do you cut it? Does it have to be perfect? Is it like, cut to perfection? Do you core it out? Or is it like, you just cut it and it's like, whatever gets the, most apple off of there is like good enough, you just want to get it from here to there. It's like functional, or is it like, how are you doing that? Which that blew my mind, because I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Because like personally, I'm more of a functional person. Like, I don't care how that apple gets in my mouth. I just want to eat it, So if I need to like just chop, and I get like a square in the middle instead of getting that extra part off, I'm like, well, I'm good. Like, I just want to eat it. But other people are going to be very much like, no, I want to get all of that apple off. I don't, I want to conserve every piece of it. I don't want to throw away any extra. Some people might actually eat the core. I used to do that when I was when I was working in wilderness therapy, because, we didn't want to carry all that trash with us. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I can eat this. I'm going to eat it. I'll spit out the seeds and like the stem, but I'll eat the whole thing. That way I don't have to carry it out with me. So it's like, it just is very interesting. And it's really an insight into like how you are as a person, if you pay attention to that. So anyways, I thought I would add to that, because it's
so Brenna, let me ask you a question then, if I can ask a question back.
Yeah, of course.
How dare you?
How, if at all, do you see that in relation to you as a writer?
Yeah, that's really interesting too, because I feel like for the most part, I also have to get hit over the head with an idea, and I want to get it down on the page. So the first draft and like getting the idea on the page is very much like, okay, I did it and it's out there, and that's good enough for now. Like, that's its function. That's what it needs to be. It just needs to be on the page. But as I like work through it, then it's like, okay, well, the function now is to get it polished and to get it, to my agent, to a publisher, on the bookshelf. So I guess it depends. It's sort of an evolution of like, what is the function? Because I am very much like, is this going to work for me? Okay, awesome. Like, I don't buy clothes. I hate shopping. So I don't have a lot of clothes. Like, I wear t-shirts and jeans and leggings like all the time. Like, no matter where you see me, that's what I'm wearing. Like, I'm eating for school. I'm rock climbing. I'm on the podcast. I'm wearing the same stuff because it's functional. It works across the board. So it doesn't matter to me how, different like avenues of that. And so it's similar in all of my life. I like to be functional. If it works, then it works. I don't need to change it.
On that note, for listeners of the podcast, you have not experienced the joy of wondering if you join the recording on Friday morning and it's the Pikachu hoodie, or it's the Adventure Time t-shirt, or whatever it is. I appreciate a limited wardrobe that reduces the amount of consideration that has. I love. This is a very philosophical Friday morning conversation, and I'm really into it. Yeah. What you're describing is constructive overthinking. And I think you've said this before, this quote, the way we do anything is the way we do everything. And it's absolutely true. And it's a self-analysis for patterns and things. So yeah, I'm taking notes. Yeah. Just keep talking.
Yeah. You can see why it was important for me to write a fart joke book, because this serious, intellectual, thought-provoking kind of conversation is where I mostly live. So I needed to really do this other thing to create some balance, to bring out another aspect of myself that gets sublimated by all of this serious, heady stuff that I think about and love to talk about.
So in a sense, it was cathartic for you.
It was cathartic. And it's 180 from my debut picture book, Doña Gracia Saved Worlds, because I think I just really needed to do that, because everything else is really serious, and I don't necessarily think of myself as a funny person, but I think it's just that I don't have confidence in being funny. And again, what's funny for some people isn't funny for other people. So in some way, being humorous is a more vulnerable place, because you don't know how it's going to really land. And it's much easier to criticize, I think, in some ways.
That is so interesting. Yeah. And I feel like as somebody who generally considers themselves, more of a humorous, like quirky writer, like sort of leaning into poetry and verse novels and that kind of thing has really opened up like a different layer of my writing, because I can write in that space, but that, like, putting those, because for me, verse novels and writing in poetry and verse tends to be more serious. It tends to be more feeling based. And that for me feels way more vulnerable than being funny on the page. Even though, like you're saying, all of those things, sort of coexist. It is more subjective to be funny. It's not funny across the board, but feelings are pretty universal, but that also feels very like vulnerable and raw and sort of like, you're just like a raw nerve on the page, which has been like, that's one that I'm sort of like, I sort of still am like dipping my toe in, like, ooh, I don't know. Am I going to be that real on the page? Like, I don't know, how is that going to be received? But it's really interesting that you're saying the opposite, because I see, I feel that, because yeah, like humor is just like, it's so hard to land anyways. And then when you do, and like you think it's funny, a handful of people think it's funny, your critique group, your agent, whatever, it still may not resonate with the bigger, broader audience. And then, you're like, well, I did the thing, like I got it to the best place I can. So what does that mean now? If it's still not doing what I want it to do. So your feelings are more universal. So anyways, that's really interesting. It's the flip of what I've been experiencing.
I feel like this is going to be the podcast of throwing out quotes and things that people say, because what that reminded me of is
hit us.
Many years, it's not a direct quote, I won't get it directly, but the poet Sharon Olds in an interview was talking about how she wasn't really worried about her own death, because there would be other poets coming and sort of taking her place, that it's a baton, it's generation to generation. And in that, she said something about how every poet, and I took this as every writer, has an audience. I mean, it's a big whole wide world, right? And that audience could be 50 people. It could be 5 people. It could be 1,000 people. It could be 1,000,000 people. It doesn't really matter. I don't know if she was saying it doesn't matter, but the idea that we all have an audience, and that the role is to make the work and make it accessible in hopes that the audience that it's meant for can have it. And I think that when we talk about the feeling of vulnerability, which I share with you, even though for the opposite way of writing, that's something that I always say to writing students and people that I coach, like, you're not writing just for yourself. I mean, I think we write initially, whatever we're writing is for ourselves. It's a conversation. It's a thought process that we're going through. And then there's a decision to make. Is this something that then needs to go beyond the first audience, which is ourselves? And if so, then there's a whole nother process, as I think others of your guests have spoken about that, that when you move from it's mine to it's for other people, and then you do the work that makes it work for other people. But at that point, it is saying, this is for my people, whoever you are. And how they receive it, some people won't receive it that well. They're not your audience. They're a different audience. So this is one of the reasons that I think self-publishing is a really important aspect, the indie publishing becoming more accessible for writers and creators, and also for the public, because it's easier to find your people, who is speaking to you. It does flood the market, that's true. It makes it in some ways harder, but it makes it harder because there's more to choose from. There's more there that can resonate for the people that need it. It's not as I can't think of the word right now.
Filtered,
curated.
Curated.
It's not
there
as
you
curated as it was when traditional publishing was really the one and only way to do things. Because, as I think you've also probably had members of your people coming on the podcast and yourselves talking about traditional publishing is a business, right? An editor can love what you're doing. An agent can adore what you're doing, but they have to make a living and they have to have a profit. Like your agent has to be able to pay the rent and the gas bill and the health insurance, and everything they do is on spec. It's like being a gambler. I could never be an agent ever. Like, it's just, everything is maybe and later and perhaps it's all speculation. It's complete speculation.
Right? Yeah.
And totally. That's why I also struggle with getting an agent, and I totally understand. Like, they're the kind of person I could never be, taking that level of risk and chance. I just think it's a different kind of person. But, we are asking a lot, like what you said, Josh, earlier about the honor of having your name on that book when so many other people are involved in it, and calling it by Josh or by Bonni or by Brenna is in some ways, even with the illustrator on there, is in some ways false advertising. We understand, and it's the way it is, and it's fine. I'm not complaining about it, but it is, if you think about it in a certain way, it's not really honest about what it is that it took to put that book there.
Well, and that's the thing. The thing to be honest about with regard to self-publishing is that probably, you talk about flooding the market. Probably what happens with a lot of self-published work, I don't know, but I'm presuming based on experience, is that people don't always make it past that audience of one. They're expecting that audience of one, audience of self, to be the same as the audience that receives the work once it's published, without necessarily a vetting process. But I think this is something I want to talk to you about too, with regard to public speaking. I think whether we are authors or agents are selling work or we are submitting to others, the really important thing is the consideration of who your audience is, the definition of who your audience is. Something I've talked about here, and I guess we can transition and talk about public speaking and all of that. Something I've talked about here is having been in Toastmasters, which you must be aware of, Bonni, but I've been I've been in Toastmasters for over 10 years. I have been in the past an extremely nervous and anxious public speaker, and the experience of having given so many speeches over the years in Toastmasters has helped me realize that the priority number one for writing or public speaking is understanding how people are hearing what you say, and the best way to craft a message that will be heard by them, or whether the message that you're trying to send is right for any given audience. It's the two-way communication. Even though I'm writing something and putting it down on a page, it's still two-way communication with a potential audience.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
The thing about public speaking that is very different, for me anyway, is that if you are speaking live, you get to take the temperature of the audience in real time. So you can switch and gauge and adjust. You're revising constantly in the moment. And once you've written a book and it's there, you don't get to revise that anymore. And so that is the part of putting thoughts and ideas in the written word, right? The written word captures, but also traps thought. And thought is not linear.
Damn, that's poetic. Again, another good duality. Captures, but also traps.
That's fascinating. Like because I feel like we all have friends, right, who are like constantly coming up with revisions up into that point where like the editor's like, look, it has gone to the printer. Like, you cannot revise or edit anymore. Like, we're done here. You know, like what we've got is what we've got.
Are you putting yourself on blast?
Even when a book is out. Maybe. But so, you know, even when it's out on the bookshelf and you're like, ooh, I wish I would have done, you know, X, Y, and Z. But you're right. When you're in like a conversation or even like a bigger audience or whatever, you can pivot and sort of like, you know, readdress and redefine and, you know, change lanes if you want to. And it's like an evolution, right? And it's that like live collaboration too that you're not getting once you put stuff down. Because then it's much more concrete, it's immovable, but it's much more malleable when you're just like, you know, chit-chatting. Or like, I think that's why I love the podcast. Like, I love to chat with people. It's like easy for me because I love to be able to sort of like, you know, take whatever you're giving me and then, you know, go with that and then redirect and pivot and whatever. And we sort of are like working together to form this like sort of energy of like how this conversation is going, right? And you can change and pick and choose. And yeah, that's fascinating. I'm like on a whole thing now, but I love your point.
This is one of the reasons for the popularity of performance poetry, spoken word, right? It is a performance. It is a live interaction, and it is recorded. I watch recordings of spoken word all the time. But I'm not just getting the words spoken by the poet or the performer or the creator. I'm also getting how they're being reacted to and how they're meeting that reaction, you know? And so it is a different thing. A shameless plug. I write children's books, but I also write for adults, and I have 2 writing books. The second one is called The Right Balance, WRITE. And a lot of my thinking and ideas and invitations to other writers and creators are in that book. And it basically breaks down the 3 parts of writing. So everything except the first draft. There's what I call percolation, revising, and then there's what I call going public. And the sort of premise of the book is when we're not feeling good as writers, we're not feeling sort of fulfilled and grateful and all those positive things, it's because we're out of alignment in one or more of those areas. And so the book goes through those 3 areas and offers some perspectives and some ideas and some shifts and some writing exercises as well to help people go back into alignment as writing. I talk about the writing self. The writing self gets out of alignment. It's like the chiropractor or acupuncture method of thinking about yourself as a writer. And I even have in there physical activities like sort of yoga for writers I didn't call it that there, but for a lack of a better thing. And it's not about stretching or about, you know, relaxing your shoulders. It's actually exercises, physical exercises. This is a little woo-woo maybe, but it's worth at least considering maybe for people that we spend so much time sitting and writing and looking and thinking and emoting that we need to do something physical as well, and not just go take a walk to clear our head, but actually writing related physical activity to bring the body into play and allow the body to give us more energy and creativity and knowledge, information about why we're out of alignment.
It's time for this week's book reviews. From Josh. Josh's review is for a quiet little 2019 book that, for whatever reason, his daughter wouldn't let him read, so he had to do it on his own. CAMILLA, Cartographer by Julie Dillemuth, illustrated by Laura Wood, is an interesting take on building new skills, exploring, and being brave. Just when CAMILLA thinks the whole world has been mapped out, she's presented with a new opportunity and a different way to use her skills. As picture book creators, this one is super relatable as an example of pursuing something for the love of it, and persevering in the face of adversity will someday lead to a reason to draw your own map, or in our case, finally find homes for our books. This one is quiet, simple, clean, relatable, and adorable. John's review for this week is The Phony Baloney of Greta Maloney by Karla Clark and illustrated by Emma Clements. Greta Maloney's imagination is so big it practically needs its own postal code, an interesting read of tall stories with an even taller lesson. Greta's wild claims, like having a pet dinosaur, earn her the nickname Phony Baloney, but with a gentle nudge from her mom, she learns to channel her fibs into something we all love and cherish, storytelling. A great way to celebrate imagination while also subtly teaching the importance of honesty. John gives this 5 skateboard sessions on Saturn's rings out of 5. And my review for this week is The Ghost with the Smelly Old Underwear by Jose Carlos Andres, illustrated by Gomez. Everyone in town is scared of the ghost with the smelly old underwear, and none of the volunteers can stand up to him until old Granny Fanny steps up with the solution that is right under everyone's noses. A true example of a picture book that's funny and absurd just for the sake of it, and a book that will leave you feeling just as perplexed as you are delighted. Don't forget to get your own requests and library reviews in. It's the #1 way to help an author's sales. And we have a special community shout out today. Special shout out for Travis and Trenise, who were robbed of all of their belongings, including irreplaceable mementos and Trenise's father's urn. If you know Trenise, then you know how much she pours into the Kidlit community. If you have the time to boost or support the fundraiser started by Chloe Ito Ward and Jessica Yoon, it would be greatly appreciated. Check the GoFundMe page and search Trenise and Travis to check the show notes for the link. And if you want to support the pod, make sure to check out our Linktree at linktree/firstshow to give a community shout out, buy merch, become a patron, or sign up for our newsletter at brennagenerat.com. And now, back to our show.
And I was going to make a joke about, I would love a chiropractor, but for writing, to give me a brain adjustment. This is essentially what that is. but I feel like what you're representing is a good side of the writing life, counter to button chair, hands-on keyboard, which is also extremely useful. But making sure that your mental wellness and your body and your sense of self and health are in alignment and conducive to writing is equally readied and in line. I'm totally on board. I don't consider that woo-woo at all.
Well, that's because there's the other level of it. Yes, to your point, absolutely. We want to have a healthy body as a writer. But what I'm proposing is that there's information for us as writers. There's information to inform our work in our bodies. And we need to access it. We need to, if you want to go with acupuncture kind of metaphors, there's like these meridians, right? And they get blocked. So I'm saying that there's body meridians. If anybody here is an acupuncturist, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I know that
it's a very small sliver in the Venn diagram of our audience.
Please forgive me for that. And it's the best I can do right now. So it's like there's meridians of our creativity and our self-knowledge and our writing skill that are blocked unless we invite those pieces outside of our bodies. It is a podcast. There's a part of me that's like, oh, let me ask them to try one and let's have a live experience of what it's like to do that. But I'm not going to put you on the spot that way.
I'm not sure that would be good listening. My bones would crack and all that.
I mean, I love that though, because I mean, even so, to take the acupuncture metaphor like a little bit like sidestep a little, right? Mm-hmm. There are, in terms of the body, there are like different chakras too that are in charge of different things, right? So sort of similar to meridians, but same thing, like those can also get blocked. And there's also, like your own energy too can sort of like block what you're trying to do, even though you're not doing that on purpose, mm-hmm. And it can even be bigger than like outside of your body. But like, I think fear of succeeding is, a lot of us have that and maybe don't recognize that we have that. 'Cause it's like, okay, if I do succeed, if I do get that contract, if I do get that editor, if I do get the auction, what does that mean for, not just me, but like what does that mean in terms of like my critique group? Like maybe my critique group isn't published yet, right? And then you're gonna like sort of skyrocket into this like auctioned like stratosphere, you know, with these like amazing authors. And it's kind of like, well, what does that mean? Like, do I still belong to this like core group that I, you know, have, you know, done all of this work with? Or, you know, what will my family think? Like, they'll be excited, but then is there like a sort of like energy that like expects that to happen every time, even though this is very rare, you know, like things like that. And it's like, it's worth it to consider sort of what you want and where you're putting your energy, and if there are blocks to what you're trying to do, you know, like refocus that on your body and sort of like, you know, figure out where those things are and sort of work through and just sort of stay really present in what you're doing, you know, put the words on the page, get it to where you want it, you know, one step at a time, and then sort of go from there. And I'm speaking, you know, from my own experience with this, because I feel like, you know, I tend to sort of put those blocks up for myself, and just not even my writing life, but like, you know, other aspects of my life, like climbing, you know, like climbing like a higher grade. Like, what does that mean? Can I do that? Am I going to be nervous? Can I like, you know, make that work? Can I do that clip? That kind of thing. So I just, yeah, it's fascinating.
It is. And that really is a lot of what I delve into in the last third of that Right Balance book. I mean, I wrote the book because you know, I wrote both of the books because from being a teacher of writing to having had a lot of writing students and being in a lot of different kinds of venues to work with people on writing. I don't like to actually think of myself as a writing teacher. I'm like a facilitator, right? Like a midwife kind of is more how I think
I love that.
I'm a writing doula.
like a conduit.
A writing doula. That's better than midwife.
Yes.
So these are, you know, in my first writing book, Room to Write, it is a series of writing prompts and exercises that are meant to help people, you know, in a variety of ways, get unblocked, used to sort of start their writing in the morning or whenever they start writing, for teachers, you know, for anything. And it's sort of structured as an affirmation book. So there's like a little micro essay and then a writing prompt that can sometimes be a choice of different ways to use the little micro essay or what we're talking about, and then an inspirational quote. But it's also designed for those who want it to be able to start learning things about themselves as writers, like which prompt they choose and kind of reflecting on why that's the one they choose, or which ones do they avoid, or which ideas do they cringe about. And all those also get you to develop, if you want to, a little bit more self-knowledge as a writer. The companion, The Right Balance, is more for understanding yourself as a writer and challenging all of the things that get in the way of being okay saying, I'm a writer. What do you do? I'm a writer. You know, just that, you know, and that's one of the first exercises, is standing up and saying out loud, I am a writer. And then seeing where your body is. Like, how's your voice? How's your physical body? Now try saying it with your hands on your hips. Now try saying it with your arms out wide. See, I'm not making you do it, but I am telling you about it.
That's the exercise that would be more conducive to a podcast. Although we would just be repeating
really
it over
exploring and reflecting on what that feels like. And people who will do it, it's kind of hard often to get writers to do it, because we are many times we're very vulnerable, and we, especially in front of other people, like, it's hard. I really want to do this at writing conferences, but there's never a writing conference where they're like, yeah, let's do it. You know, like, it's like, it's a little weird, whatever, we're not doing that. But it is, I've had people just break down in tears or say, I can't do it, or I can't speak it louder than quietly, or I can't say those words. And others who are like, yes, finally, yes, I'm here saying it. You know, I'm opening my arms and I'm putting my hands on my hips and I'm doing a power stance and I'm a writer, you know? And I think it's not that you have to get to that point to be a writer. It's just really, I think, valuable to understand where you are in that. because it informs so much of how you move forward. And giving your body the opportunity to tell you, to help you, is opening up another channel in your creativity, in your body. And if you do it enough, your body will continue to help you, move forward or understand something, or be the receptacle for what you need to hold and what you're ready to give in a more conscious relational way,
The body as receptacle is another thing that really resonates with me. This is another thing we've talked about, is this notion of us channeling ideas rather than being the origin of ideas.
Right,
and
exactly.
I'm not sure in what way I directly align with that, although as often as not, it certainly feels that way when we're writing.
So let me invite you to think about it in this way, that just as the written word, the sentence, is what holds our creative energy, right? The words in the sentence, the written word, contain that. We also are containing that, whatever that is, whatever that creativity is, whatever that fear is, whatever things, like we are the paragraph or the book or the whatever that holds those things. And then we're also on top of that translating those things that we hold in our bodies and in our minds and our hearts, wherever they come from. And we're putting them in a sentence. So it's not too far of a leap, maybe, for not for everybody, a leap to think that the same thing is happening on a meta level. Boy, this is really getting intense, right? That we are also the sentence that is holding a creativity, a message, an energy that is being channeled through us.
For the record, we have talked about tarot. We have talked about past life regression on this show. No subject, well, I won't say no subject is taboo, but, we are happy to explore many themes and many belief systems.
Yeah. And I mean, I find it fascinating because I feel like, in terms of that energy, like a lot of what you're saying is sort of like imposter syndrome is something we all struggle with, right? And it's like you're sort of coming face to face with that imposter syndrome and trying to figure out, where you are in terms of that, like, pendulum, because I feel like on a day-to-day basis, I feel differently about it. Like some pieces I'm like, no, 100%, like I was meant to write this. I did a great job writing this. This thing is amazing. Like, even if it doesn't sell, I don't care. This is how it came out. I love this piece, right? Other stuff I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I really like this subject. Maybe I did it justice. I'm not sure. Like I need somebody else to like justify this, so I'm like looking outside of myself to get that validation, which I think is very much saying like, that's the imposter syndrome, right? That's that like chunk where it's like, I'm now looking for somebody else to be like, no, this is great. It's valuable. That's justified, which is like, that's where you go wrong, right? In writing, like if you're looking for that constantly, you're setting up for a lot of disappointment, so recognizing that, I guess, and being like, okay, hello, imposter syndrome, let me figure out how I can sort of like get the pendulum back to balance and, sort of walk that line of confidence and also, being a little bit humble and understanding, like there could be room for me to improve this manuscript, even though I currently think it is really good where it is, no matter what happens, like I feel good about it, but I'm open to having, some other input, some other whatever, as opposed to being way out here and just being like, oh God, like, I need somebody else to just love this thing and not be open to a lot of like feedback because you can't handle it. It's like too much. Anyways.
Yeah. So I would say that part of my work as a writing doula is helping people parse that out, right? Like, because some of it is about, it's done its work on me and now I want to explore how it will impact other people. And for that, I need to know how it impacts other people. And I need to be able to adjust it. So if other people are having an experience that is like the experience that I've had having written it, right? So that I think is not necessarily an imposter syndrome. There is the part of us that wants recognition, wants to be told we did a great job, told that it's brilliant. And that's a different part of us that, again, my work is in helping people tell themselves a different story, right? Okay, one more. Muriel Rukeyser, the universe is made of stories, not of atoms. I think it's made of both, but I think it's the stories we tell ourselves about the atoms that is the power. And so it's finding another story. It's being able to hold both, and like both stories are true. I really want to be recognized, so I feel validated. And I also know that if I want this work to be available to other people, it has to change in a way, because they're not experiencing it from having it been in their brain in a non-linear fashion and then put in a linear fashion. They're just getting the linear fashion, and that isn't the same experience. So I think that's where I would maybe refine that a little bit, or drill down a little further with that. But I will admit to you here, live or recorded forever, I literally fall in love with anything I write. Anything I write to finish.
That's very healthy.
I fall in love. I think it is the most brilliant, wonderful, incredible thing, and it makes me so happy. And I'm like, look what I did. Look what came out of me. Look what came through me. Wow. And I know from, years and years of doing this, that I'm going to take it to my critique group, and they're going to tell me, well, I don't understand this, and I don't really know what you're talking about there, and what about this, and, and I'm like, but this is what I'm trying to say, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, well, that's not what's being said here. It's like, but of course it is. It's right there. Right. I just said it. And of course, because for me, that's what it is. And it takes me a really, really long time to get a piece into a shape that is going to be good for everybody else, because I'm in love with it, like in love. And I can't do the real revision work that's going to really move it to other people until that relationship has cooled down a lot. And it can take it can take years and years for that to happen for me. It can happen sooner, but it often happens after years and years. And that's just who I am. And in some ways, I think it's because I'm a little dense, like honestly, I think there's like this sort of, I consider myself neurodivergent. And I think this is one of those pieces of my brain, how it's wired a little differently, but I have to live with that piece for a really, really long time to get why it is that I need to read it, like why I wrote it, what it's telling me, what it's teaching me, what it's asking me. And then once I can answer that for myself, then it's like, okay, all right, now let's get it out there, or let's not get it out there. But it's that, and I could not write anything without critique groups, without editors, without an audience to tell me what's really going on. Because I'm in my little magical world of the power of language and what it does to me, and how did I think of that, and oh my gosh, and wow, and well, again, it's a lovely place. Yeah, but it's not, and it's fine. And that's the other thing I want to say. It's fine to hang out there, because every single piece that I write does not have to be for everybody else all the time. Some pieces are just for me, and they never see the light of day. And I've written poems and stories that still reverberate for me and give me chills when I reread them or think about them, but that not necessarily are they going to do that for anybody else. And sometimes I'm not even interested in sharing them with other people.
Yeah. You're really tonally consistent with this central, we see things how we are, we write things how we are. And then there is that adjustment period. So, I'm going to do a transition before time gets too far away from us. The transition is as follows. In terms of work that has made it to an audience, the public eye, as being received and consumed by others, we haven't talked about Doña Gracia at all, except for you mentioned it once, and I feel like we would be doing it a grave injustice if we didn't spend at least a little bit of time on it, because this is one of those very, very sweet, very sort of deep dive specific, unsung hero, untold moments of history and personality that clearly seized on you in a way that made you want to champion it. The art is beautiful. Writing's beautiful.
Mm.
I mean, where did the book come from for you in that I fell in love with this way?
Well, the story is this is 14 years ago, I was in a mother-daughter bat mitzvah class with my daughter, and we were learning each week about another female Jewish hero leader in preparation for the girls to think about what they wanted to contribute to the Jewish community. And I was in that group with 9 other mother-daughter pairs whom I knew. Many of them had had a lot of education Jewishly, both as young people, but also as adults pursuing it. And when we got to Doña Gracia, none of us had ever heard of her. Now, I didn't think that was weird for me because I wasn't that, connected. But these women who had spent time, money, energy really pursuing Jewish study had never heard of her. And and also I knew a lot of people who were teaching in Jewish day schools and in synagogue school on Sundays. And their big complaint was, oh, we don't have enough women to teach, and we certainly don't have enough Sephardic heroes and leaders to talk about, which is a whole other thing, which I'm not going to try to explain. But so there's Ashkenazi, there's a lot of different cultural aspects of Judaism because we're in a diaspora, and there's a dominance of what is Ashkenazi, and there is a lesser information out there in general mainstream Judaism about Sephardic Jews, Mizrahi Jews, etc. So here was this incredible, unbelievable woman who was both Sephardic and a woman doing this amazing work, and nobody knew who she was. And I was incensed and I was confused. I was like, how can this be? This is ridiculous. Like, I was really like, this is ridiculous. And something has to be done about it. And it was a very strategic decision. I thought, no way can I have any influence on making sure that Jewish day schools and synagogue schools include Doña Gracia in their curriculum. I have no power that way. But if I write a children's picture book, then there's a greater chance that children will be introduced to her when they're very young. And so at least they won't ever say, I didn't know who that was. And there'll be greater reach and greater potential if that's what happens. And so that is why I decided to write it. And I think on a personal level, there were 2 things that were moving me, one of which I didn't realize until very recently. The first one is that she is a character who had to be a secret Jew, a crypto Jew. She lived during the time of the Inquisition, and she was a Jew in secret, and she was outwardly Catholic, and everything that she did Jewishly was in secret. She also committed herself to saving other secret Jews and protecting them, and that's what is so remarkable about her, how she did that and who she was as a person, and what kind of influence and power she wielded as a non-royal woman at the time that she lived in the 1500s. It was sort of unheard of. And so there's all these wonderful things that she did that I won't go into here, but suffice it to say, it's pretty remarkable. It's pretty impressive. And, but she did it all as a secret Jew. And I had it sort of resonated to me about this concept of identity and what identity means and who gives identity and what it means to self-identify and what it means to be identified by other people. Like, other people couldn't know she was a Jew. She couldn't identify that way publicly because it was dangerous. And internally, of course, she completely identified as a Jew, and she had to keep those 2 identities compartmentalized, which are all things that we all do. And as Jews, I mean, not right now. Right now is a very different time period, but I felt like a lot of Jews sort of keep that identity kind of not sort of secret in a certain way, like I'm not going to tell anybody, but I'm not bringing it up, or I keep it sort of on the side, or I don't make a big deal about it outside of my community, et cetera, et cetera. And so I thought that was very resonant. And also for children, the whole idea of identity and who we are at home and who we are out in public was very powerful. Yeah. And so that is where I think I sort of, fell into, oh my gosh, this is really hitting me. and how am I a secret Jew, and how am I not a secret Jew? How am I out and how am I not? And all of that stuff. More recently, I did all this research. I talked to people. I traveled to Portugal, in Lisbon, where she lived. I did all kinds of things. I talked to scholars, all kinds of things to write this book. And only in the last year or so has it occurred to me that I probably have some Sephardic heritage, some Sephardic in my family. And I suspect it was my mother's father, my maternal grandfather's family probably had Sephardic origin. And I can't prove it. I can't, nobody's still alive and there's nothing to look at, or I'm not obsessive enough or interested, oh, I got to find everything in the, that's not who I am. And I feel, this is very personal to me, I feel as a Jew that I will not do DNA testing. That just feels internally to me wrong on all levels, and not wrong for anybody else. I want to be really clear. I completely understand why people do it, and I support people to do it. But my own relationship to anti-Semitism and, that the whole history of Jews, not just the Holocaust and not just the Inquisition, but all the way back, is that my form of protest and activism about that is I'm not doing that. I'm not defining myself that way or having to prove anything to anybody or making a statement that way. I will just say that I feel very connected to Sephardic Judaism in many ways more so than Ashkenazi flavor Judaism, and that it is really likely that my grandfather on my mother's side, that their people were actually Sephardic Jews. So that was interesting to me too, in this whole conversation we've had about things that come up and what you need to get out of it. And I think that is something that I didn't get out of this until here, almost a year later, when the book was published. So you just never know.
So to be clear about that point, that bit of sort of exploration of self-identity came very late in the process of exploring this book then, right?
Well, the part about Sephardic heritage in my family did, absolutely.
Yeah,
which I think is just very hilarious. Come on, you spent 14 years working on this, really comfortable and feeling better about connecting with Sephardic Jews and Sephardic customs and all of that. And it never once occurred to me, I'm a smart person, right? I have a master's degree, I'm a published author. And it just never even occurred to me. That is the brilliance of humanity, right? I could walk around for 14 years and it didn't occur to me until last year, okay, I guess that could be true.
You never, no one ever made you stand up and spread your arms wide and say, I'm a Sephardic Jew.
Right.
To help you
It never occurred to me for someone to even say that to me. I just didn't.
No.
I have to say, the running theme throughout our conversation today has been very much this sort of duality of ideas, of thought, of identity. It's it's fascinating. It's been very we've discussed a lot of different pieces, but there is a running, a main thread, which is just, I mean, it's been absolutely fascinating. I've loved talking to you about all of this stuff. It's been amazing. And actually, before we let you go, I do want to acknowledge that book won an award recently, the Oregon Spirit Award, correct? Yeah.
Yes, the Oregon Spirit Book Award.
Huge congratulations. And how did you, is there, I don't know if there's a ceremony or a congratulations or what, can you tell us more about that award?
Sure. There is one coming up. There's a day, a conference, and then awards dinner. So I get to do that kind of fun thing. Although I kind of feel shy about those things. I'm not really I'm oh, what do I wear? It's sort of, okay, I have to be out there. But it is a great honor, and I'm so happy. I feel so happy that, my whole thing with this book is that people should know and be introduced to Doña Gracia, and so this is only going to help that. And so that is my joy and my honor that they're going to help it along by doing that. And I just love the idea of Oregon Spirit Award, because the Oregon Spirit of is sort of one of pioneering and moving forward and doing things and that is so Gracia that I just think it's also really appropriate. But let's be also, for this audience, picture book world is saturated, and winning an award is a really helpful thing, even just a regional award, because it gives more opportunity and more exposure in the very, very full market. So in that way, it was a great boon, as a career thing. But more importantly to me, it just maybe will help more people buy the book. I just want to say one other quick thing, which is that one of the issues with the story of Donna Gracia is that it is during the Inquisition and that she is a secret Jew, which I think is part of why she was problematic for people to write about. Like, this is the first picture book ever about her. This is the only picture book to introduce her to young people. And the big shift that I had to also make was, I didn't have to make it, publishers had to make it, is it's not a book about the Inquisition. It's a book about Donna Gracia. It's a book all about what she did, not why she had to do it. I never in the actual book ever mention the Inquisition. It is mentioned in the back matter, and only very briefly, but I wanted this book to be something that nobody felt uncomfortable reading to their child, because she is a remarkable person. And I got some flack from other Jews, from Sephardic Jews, from non-Sephardic Jews, because I left things out, because they didn't agree with the history that I was presenting, because there's no primary sources about her, right? I mean, everything is secondary. So sometimes when I was talking to scholars, there were two different versions of what was going on. And I chose the one that worked better for the narrative and for kids. And I pulled things that were even maybe more fictionalized, but were certainly true, and where I massaged those truths for children, right? And so there was a lot of like, well, it wasn't really accurate. Well, and it's like the purpose of this book, and there are other Donna Gracia books out there. Like, let's have a lot of them. Like, everyone should know about her. But I had a purpose, and that purpose was let people learn who she is and how wonderful she is. And like all things children oriented, we give a bit of an introduction, and then that hopefully starts a thread that moves through time and age and appropriate development. And so that is something that we didn't get to talk about here, but it was hard. It was really hard being that some Jewish people did not embrace this book and felt that I had not done a good job. And I had to let that go. Like, when you put yourself out like that, you're going to have people like, who are like, that wasn't good, or it didn't do this, or it didn't do that. But again, it's the audience, right? I didn't write it with the same intention that those people were disappointed that I didn't meet, right? I wrote it for other people.
Again,
right?
Tonally consistent all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, talking about the purpose of reviews and things, which, by the way, as of recording this, I looked it up, and you've got, 5 stars on Amazon and a healthy number of reviews. So, kudos there. It's reaching the target audience, but that's the other consistent point, right? Is making intentional choices in order to reach a certain subsection of audience, knowing that you're not going to reach everybody is really, really is critical.
Right, because for everything you're writing, there's 100 other things you're not writing.
Right.
Yep.
Which, that just feels very, like, sort of freeing, right? You're not trying to, you're like, okay, it's going to be easy for me to let this go because that was not my intent. Like, that's okay. That's really interesting. And it also is sort of a personal reminder to, really know, like, what I'm setting out to do with what I'm working on, because that is how you're going to ultimately connect, right? That's the through line. But
honestly, it totally hurt. And I totally cried. Yeah. And it was painful. Of course it is. Yeah. I'm human. And I had to help myself tell myself the story again. Like, I had to say, okay, that story's true. I'm really hurt. I'm disappointed. I feel betrayed, all of those things. And it's also true. And then there's this other one. And then I get to choose where I want to put my energy, into which story, into which narrative. And I choose the narrative that is more helpful and is going to move me along and get Donna Gracia to the readers that need her or want her.
Right.
Gosh, that holding two things, right? That yes and, like, two things can be true, or more than two things can be true, is so, that's something I feel like we still, everybody grapples with, all the time. Like, even as an adult, I'm like working through sort of figuring out, like, I can feel more than one thing about this person in my life. I can love them and also be really mad at them at the same time. That those things are really hard. And like you're saying, being okay with the audience you wanted to reach, and also feeling upset, that it didn't resonate with these people, is you can have both, which is, gosh, that's hard. Like,
it's hard because of the culture that we live in. Other cultures can live with both and more readily because they're raised that way. It is, in my opinion, and then I'll stop, one of the big problems in our country today. Is the inability to know how to exist with both and this obsession with having one truth, and this way in which there has to be a binary. It's this or it's that, and one is right and one is wrong, and there's no both are right. What if both are right? What if both are right and there's three others too? I always say there's at least three versions of something. There's three choices, there's three options always. And maybe more. This
has been a beautiful conversation, Bonni. Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm not sorry that we didn't cover Donna Gracia earlier, because we've had this wonderful hour-long conversation. But I really hope that we did it justice. So yeah, thank you for taking this time, and thank you for sharing your both your quotable things that I've taken notes about that I've loved, as well as your perspective and all of your experience. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And I look forward to seeing more of both of your writing and more of these podcasts.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much,
I promise not
Bonni.
to step into the fart space.